So Rob, I got a question. Well, for all of you actually, you said before that you think the judge should have shut down his behaviour earlier. How would you guys have dealt with it as a judge? What would you have done differently?
I would have instructed the bailiffs very early to physically remove him from the courtroom before he starts talking. The second he starts speaking, I would have had the bailiff come in there and take him and physically remove him from the courtroom. And I would have given him a warning before doing that to say that, Mr. Brooks, if you continue down this path, I will have my bailiffs remove you from the courtroom. And I'm telling you right now, I don't want to do that in front of the jury, but you by your own actions might trigger that. And that is a consequence that you don't want to see. Those bailiffs were remarkably restrained. And Spidey, I don't know if you caught any of the facial expressions on them during some of the trial. You could tell that they were not pleased that they had to sit back and listen to that without acting.
Sure. Well, they had a shock thing. You know, they're all sitting there saying,
I wanted that.
Come on, press the button. Press the button. Come on.
You're ready,
Bill, you can press the button. I know. I mean, well, okay. So Dr. Dawes, that's a great question back to you. I had heard one way to deal with somebody that behavior is you give them a choice. You have to say, you are going to do this or this. Choose.
Yeah. So
choose.
I think I completely concur with what Rob says. You have to shut it down. You have to make it clear what the options are and what the consequences are really early on, and shut it down almost immediately. Even though I think that's the right course of action, I also am 100% convinced that in his mind, in his paranoid mind, it would have just played into
the paranoia.
His perspective of being mistreated and of everything being unfair and this conspiracy behind it. With true paranoia, there's very little you can do to argue against it, to be honest with you. So he's going to feel that whatever you do.
So, I mean, okay, let's ask the general question on that then. He has all these conditions. Does he belong in an institution or a prison?
Prison.
Yeah. So basically, for somebody to end up in a psychiatric unit, like a secure unit for offenders, they have to reach the threshold for a psychiatric defense. So in the UK where I'm based, it'd be like not guilty by reason of insanity, or because it's murder, it'd be diminished responsibility. So I won't go through the medico-legal criteria because it'll send us all to sleep. And I know that it's half 2 in the morning for Alita. But the crux of the matter is, did they know what they were doing, and did they know that it was wrong? Right. So I think even though Darrell Brooks is absolutely paranoid, is really argumentative, has all these weird character traits and possibly even slightly delusional beliefs, if he intentionally ran over those people, you know, notwithstanding what he's saying about being shot at by the police, which I don't think anyone's buying, if he ran over those people for whatever reason, hateful reason, racist reasons, then he did know what he was doing. Right. So I don't think he'd have met that criteria. So he should go to prison. Maybe he should have some psychiatric treatment in prison, antipsychotics therapy to help with his paranoia. That's a different kind of topic, but definitely within prison rather than hospital.
Yeah, but correct me if I'm wrong, but with personality disorders, isn't it basically that any forced psychiatric treatment is not going to stick or do anything at all? They have to will it, and they have to voluntarily submit themselves to the therapy. Not only that, they have to buy it as you're selling it to them, actually, not just pretend to buy it. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of the people with, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the reasons why a lot of people with personality disorders, they never actually address them. They pretend to address them, and they demonstrate they're going through the steps, but they never actually believe it or buy it. So they never actually correct themselves.
Yeah, so a couple of things I'd say there. So with personality disorders, medication you can't reverse a personality disorder with any kind of medication. And you can, in theory, with like psychotic disorders, you can medicate people against their will under the Mental Health Act in psychiatric units, not in prison, but in psychiatric units with mental illnesses. With personality disorders, you have to give therapy. And as you say, Rob, people have to engage. They have to sort of show motivation and willingness. As to whether they can ever get better, that's a bit of a contentious issue, but from my clinical experience, some people can improve. But number one, it needs an internal epiphany from themselves. So they have to want to change. And often it's because they go through, I'm not talking about Darrell Brooks, but in other cases that I've seen, they go through this cycle of being arrested, of acting violently, of losing friends, of losing communication with family. So it's because their life has been damaged over and over again that they actually want to change. So it's usually quite a bit later on in life. And they have to, And it takes a long time. That's the other thing I was going to say. So it's not, you're literally talking about changing people's personality structures and re-socializing them. So it takes months, if not years. And sometimes there's relapses. So they seem to be better for months, and then whatever they have an argument or a run-in confrontation, then they get worse. So it's a very complicated process. But yes, in theory, some people do improve.
I have a question. So what about the fact that there were cameras in the courtroom? He knew that it was being televised. And how does that potentially impact the level of his behavior? Because it seems like it got more and more outrageous as the trial went on. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but that was my impression. I wasn't following it as closely as, say, Rob was from the beginning. But that was the impression that I had. Could that have impacted, I don't know, some of his behavior, the fact that he knew that it was being recorded, for example?
That's a good question. At the end of the day, to piggyback back on that, in his cell, could he have been watching the day's coverage or the day's news about the stunt that he did in the courtroom?
No, I don't think he's given access to that. He has access to very, very locked down computers that allow him to do legal research and word processing, but it doesn't allow him a free reign to the internet.
No, television. I mean, I'm talking about nightly news, like the television in the cell block. If there's a cell block, because you know that he was probably featured today's testimony because he's local. Would he possibly been getting off watching his own stunts being played back on television? So
possible. Like Spidey's asked me this. Other people have asked me this. What is the record he's referring to? He keeps saying, for the record, the record, the record, the record, the record.
On the record.
The record in his mind, just based on watching his observations, is the camera. It's the camera, which is why he's so focused on whether the audio is rolling before he starts talking. When the judge begins the court day, everyone steps in and the judge's mic is the first one to go hot. And the judge says the appearance of the parties as they were before. And they say, please note your appearance and introduce yourself for the record. And Mr. Brooks almost every single day would ask if the audio was working yet before he started speaking. So for him, the record was this magical being that just recorded anything and everything that took place in that courtroom, which in part was the cameras.
Oh, and he also was concerned about being muted, but I got way ahead. Dr. Das, back to Alita's question.
Yeah, I think, to me, from what I've seen, and I don't profess to have seen all the available footage, it doesn't feel like he is doing this because he wants to be the center of attention. He doesn't seem like somebody, but he's narcissistic to a degree in that he speaks over people and he's quite arrogant and he believes that what he's saying is correct. But he doesn't seem like a show-off kind of narcissist or a histrionic kind of person. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, to me, he wants to, he's raising his voice and he's arguing because he genuinely believes that he's being wronged. So again, it comes back to paranoia rather than histrionics and narcissism to me. So I think the cameras being in the courtroom are important because he believes that that he's right and that other people need to listen to him to be on his side, which is obviously
someone outside the courtroom will see it and side with him. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. That's what I think. I think he's trying to align himself with other people because he believes he's right, rather than because he's doing it purely for attention.